right now, everybody's putting in the chat where they're coming from, and we've got so many people coming in such wonderful locations. Denmark, Canada, Georgia, New Mexico, Virginia. It's amazing. Now what's absolutely wonderful is this option that you're seeing me right now is very similar to our live meetings. The only difference with the live meetings, you're able to actually talk to me and see other students, and then I would walk you through the tools. Here, you're not able to do that. But the other exciting thing is I have been starting to explore expanding live online meetings, just like, or not meetings, but workshops, just like this. We had our first one, I think it was last month or the month before, and I will keep you posted on that. It was a 3-day live, and I'd like to do more of those. So for this, I'm going to take a look at the chat again. Canada, Ohio, Alberta, and I just have so many ideas. And for those that have taken my live workshops, you know that I love being with the students. I love that interaction. In fact, what I used to do is when I'd be here in the studio, I'd paint and I would have it in galleries. And I wanted more of that interaction with the people. I just didn't like being isolated in the studio. And I also think that this is why this platform is fantastic for all of us, because it keeps us motivated. It keeps you motivated. We all learn. I learn from you. You learn from me. It's just a beautiful relationship. So today, I planned on this meeting. If you know my meetings, they can go on for quite a while because I try to look at everybody's work and then I try to do demonstrations and so on. But those usually go for an hour. This is planned for 45 minutes. And I'm so happy that you're, okay, for Monia, you don't have any sound. Go ahead, make sure that you turn up your volume, because I've done that before where I can't hear everybody, and make sure your volume's up. And we've got Nancy from Portland. Hi, Nancy. And Lalia from Denmark. This is fantastic. So I was also thinking it would be fun to do more of these general webinars, because I just like building that. But the thing is trying to figure out my schedule. That's a challenge. So anyway, what we are doing right now is I just want to address the courses that I have, which is the Fearless Flowers. We're just finishing that up. That was the orange cactus back there, along with a very dramatic purple tulip. And Waves and Water is now in session. You can see that right behind me. That one over there, what I did is just expand on some of the techniques that I showed the students this last week about using the belly of the brush to create those brush strokes. And that one is a lot of fun. That's not yet in the course, but I'll talk about that later. And then starting tomorrow, we have Rock, Sand, and Sea Glass. And if you haven't joined, if you want to join, you can use the code SUMMER18 for a 25% discount. Now, I hope that worked for you with the sound. And I just wanted to make sure where we're at here. And what I'm curious about is how many of you are already enrolled in are you enrolled in an interactive or a non-interactive course? So how about either you write that in, or are you in an interactive course? I think that'd be the easiest. That way you can just write NO or yes. And let's see, there's, okay, and there's some other questions, but I was just curious how many courses you were enrolled in. So what I planned on doing is I wanted to look at some photographs to give you my thought process. Oh, that's interesting, because why I wanted to do this is to give the people that have not had a chance to be in an interactive course some idea of what it's like. And I am going to look at the photographs and I'm going to break them down. And as you can tell, I'm talking much faster than I do in my videos. And the reason for that is I have so much that I want to cover within a short period of time, and I just really get excited. So also, one thing before I forget, like for those of you that are enrolled in the kids course, the Watercolor for Kids and Young at Heart. Now that's meant for also adults. It's just broken down into a much simpler form. So hopefully you can paint with kids, or the kids can do it. And if you don't mind being talked to as a little person, then that's really a fun course. But what I wanted to show you was this here. You can get this at Michael's Reeves. I just tried this the other day with my grandchildren, and I was very happy with the pigmentation of that. And I think you can really have a lot of fun with that. So hopefully in the future, I'll work more with that. Okay, so let's go ahead, and I'm going to take a look. Let's see. All right, I just wanted to make sure that there was a question that came in that I addressed that. And I'm going to review your chat later if I don't get to everything. So what I'm going to do right now is I want to look at some of the pictures. What I also wanted to do later is to do a little demonstration, if we can do that. And that's why I'm also going very quickly. And I think before I move on to that, I want to show you. This is a course that we did looking photographs into paintings. I think that's what we called it, pictures into paintings. And I'm basically going to do something similar to this. Now, this was an interactive course, but right now it is non-interactive. But I just wanted you to see that. And I am going to take a picture and try to give you some idea of how to break that down. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at some of these pictures. And here we go. This should be, you should be viewing this right now. Yes. Okay. I have a small window here, and I'm moving things around, and I'm just going to close that out. And I'd like to see if I can see the chat again, just so I can make sure that I've got everything. And we've got Miriam. I'm so glad you're going to be in Spokane. That'll be fun. I'm really looking forward to that. And if you have any questions before the course, let me know and we can talk about it. It's going to be really exciting. So anyway, also going back to that question that comment that I made earlier, is that with the live courses, I love traveling and seeing everybody, but I found it limiting in many ways because I wasn't able to continue to expand the way that I wanted to. And I did not want to give up the option of being with you. And so this option with the live meetings has been wonderful. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a few photographs, and I want to go through them and break down some of them. I've got a lot of pictures to look at, and obviously I can't look at all of them, but I'm going to give you my thought process on how I would approach it. And I kept looking at them this morning, and I just kept adding to this file, but anyway, let's take a look at this. I also have the Orchids course coming up in the future, probably in September, I think. And let's see, let's take a look at this. So I'm just going to flip through a few of these first, just so you can get an idea. And I'm just thinking about them as I'm talking here. I have a lot in this file. Now, what I like about this is the color, the shape, and I would think, do I want to actually go ahead and just focus on the flowers? And a lot of times I would, and maybe eliminate the background. Everything looks beautiful with a really white background, but it can also look very incomplete. And as I'm looking at this, I thought I really like how that mottled effect would be in the background. You could work with that wet into wet. And I do like the composition. Like, we could eliminate this over here, but I do like how it plays through the entire painting. Now, a lot of times we don't want, like if you see something like this, you don't necessarily want it to go shooting off the paper or into a corner, because then you have taken the viewer right out of the painting. But what I do like about this is that, if you can see, I like this bent branch a lot. It brings the viewer right back in, moves them around, and then brings them right back into the painting. And obviously this is not a painting, but that would be my thought process at the time. And I really like these lighter blues in here and yellows, so I would do some mingling of color with the similar to the backgrounds and shadows course. We really cover a lot of that in there. We have exercises and how it's applied into the paintings. So I would refer back to that in my mind of how I would work with this background. I also love this little bit of green and how that plays with the pink. So for just a moment, I'm going to take a look at the Lisa. It looks like Lisa. Hi, it's so nice to, I see your name here. I miss you. And Lisa we did a workshop in Jackson, and that was wonderful. Loved it. So, okay, let's take a look at this. All right. So that pink flower here, the pink orchid, gave you an idea of the things that I'd be thinking about in this particular composition. Now, I also want to show you where I would start and move through a painting. What I love about this is the movement and action here. And where we all get stuck, I think, is that we're trying to paint every little detail that we see. So if I was doing this to simplify and minimize, more than likely I would be using my flat brush. And in the, let's see, I think it's a Waves and Water course, we have a landscape, or the waterfall. So more importantly, what I'd be trying to capture is that movement of the waterfall coming down here. And I love doing them. We don't want to try to paint every little detail. You don't need to go in with a little tiny brush, because if you go in with a brush that's too small, it's going to look overworked. And this would be fun to come back to. And then here, this is basically values. So if, let's see, the atmospheric landscape course, this would be a good one. How I would approach this is that I would start in the background, start with my sky, and then I would increase the color of my oranges down here, because we can obviously see that, get the background in first, and then transition into a blue, let it dry, and then come back in with this value here. In fact, I could show you a very easy demonstration on that. And let's see, that would be the same thing that would apply to this. I would work on the background first, and then get the reflection in here. So I think, do you want to see, why don't you let me know in the chat box, would you like to see a basic demonstration on this and that, or do you have the idea from the atmospheric landscape course? Okay, great, because this is very, very simple. All right, so let's go and do that. And because I do have another one sketched out that I thought would be really fun to do. And the waterfall, I see the waterfall. Okay, then you know what? I mean, I've got so much that I wanted to do with you. How about if I do the waterfall and the, that simple one? We'll see. Okay, so what I did here is I took 140, because I thought 140-pound cold press paper, because I thought that this would be good for you to see this. If you haven't already seen that in one of the lessons, is that we just fold it back and forth. Now, if you're using a Fabriano, that could be challenging to do this because it has a different weave to the paper. But I just folded it back and forth. I started a small little tear right there. I think you can see that right there. I'm going to pinch the paper just like that, or pinch it any way it's comfortable for you to do. Okay, I'm putting those little wings out like that, and I'm having an angle like this, and I just press, and that's the easiest way to tear your paper without it tearing right across the paper or page here. And what I'm thinking about is we were doing that simple, I'm going to break this down just a little bit more to do that, those simple soft paintings, those atmospheric paintings. I'll move this over to the side for a moment. Just like that. Now when I do, and this also fits nicely in the frame here. Now when I'm doing a smaller landscape like this, yes, you can tear a 300-pound paper with this, Linda. And what I would like to do in a smaller painting is usually tape the edges, but that would take a minute. If you have artist tape, you can do that. Artist tape is great, but it can also tear softer sized surface paper. And it won't tear this, but a softer sized paper has a very soft feeling to it. It's velvety, and those little hairs are a little more likely to stick to the tape, and you could tear the paper, so you want to be careful with that. Painter's tape won't do that. And if you do a small little landscape, it's just nice to have the, I'll go ahead and actually do this. The only problem is the blue can be distracting for people. I'm going to go ahead. It just leaves you with a nice little edge. Now I don't do this when I'm doing my florals, because when I do my florals, I like to bring the watercolor right out to the edge of the paper, and then I float the painting. Let's see. All right, I'll just take these, flip them back. We can always deal with this later. This is a 140-pound paper, just because it's going to be fine and effective for what we're trying to do. And let's see, I'm going to go back to, so I can see the painting or the photograph that we're going to be doing. And in fact, let's go and have you, I'm thinking, do I want you? Nah, I'm not going to go back so you can look at it right now. Let's just go through the process. Okay. All right, so we've got our paper here. I'm going to move this out of the way so it's not distracting. I'm taking that paint out of the way. And then what I'm thinking about, actually I'm going to go ahead and show you again. All right, so what I'm going to do is wet the paper, get this color in first, bring it down, and then get into the blue, and then it has to dry. And then I would come in working with my values here. And that would be the same thing for that one. So just so you have a reference point. And as I'm looking at this now, a lot of you know that I like to use lots of water. And let's see, I'm just looking at what does float your painting mean? What that means is that you have, instead of using a mat, you're showing the edge of the paper. So, because if I don't address this right now, I am going to forget about it. It has a beautiful edge to it. Let's see if you can see that. Do you see how it's the edge of the paper? And if you want it to be more effective, what you can do is actually have another mat right there. So you get the idea, like that. So it's always very beautiful. Okay, going back to the amount of water. If I use my hake brush, which a lot of you know that I love to use, but it's that love-hate relationship because it can lose a lot of hair. So I would think for what I want to do, and this size, this brush might hold too much water. I'm just thinking about that. If I go back to a synthetic brush, it's likely to hold more of an even layer of water, but it may not move the way I want it to. So what I could do I'm going to go ahead and give this a try, because right now for the time period that we have, I'm thinking I don't necessarily want a ton of water on there. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to intentionally load it with more water. I don't think, there we go. So I'm not, usually I go like that, remove the extra water and tap it, but I'm going to try to get more water on the surface here. Okay. So a lot of you that have taken the courses, then you already know this. So I'm going to look at the surface. Do you see how it has more of an even sheen on there? It doesn't have a puddle. And I'm thinking, I really want that puddle on there so I can move that color. That would go for both of those landscapes that I looked at. So I'm going to go ahead, get my hake brush after all, and I'm going to put some water on there. Now you can see, maybe you can see that. Let's see if I can make, anyway, you'll see it with the color. I'm going to use a number 20 brush instead of a 30. If I use a number 20 brush, this is a blend, so it has natural hair and synthetic fiber. If I use a natural brush and I've already applied a lot of water on the surface, I could easily have very weak color because it'll hold a lot of water in here. And then once this applied with the water and color goes to that surface, it's going to dilute quite a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and remember we have that lighter color in the sky and we've got the blue down below. Let me get back to the picture so I can see it wherever I put that. I just have to move it off the screen here. All right. I'm going to clean out my brush, and just in case you're wondering, do I ever use soap to clean out my brushes? The answer is no. I mean, it's a very, very rare case that I would do it. All I would do is rinse it out like that. Now I'm thinking for the sky, we're going to have a little tiny bit of blue, and then it's going to go down into a yellow. And how do you do that without it turning green? And then we have blue down below. So I'm going to actually use a little cobalt blue here. And if you noticed, I went from my water container to the palette, got some water here, and then my color. And I don't want it to be too, oh, I totally lost that thought. Because what I'm thinking about right now is as I apply the water and color to the surface, the blue has a tendency to settle, and you can end up with a streak if you don't move it. Here, you can see how that water is moving through the surface there. So I'm going to let some of that excess water run off. Then I'm going to take whatever color I have up here. Now, here I have that blue. Remember, we could actually go a little green, which I don't want. But if I go take that little bit of yellow, this is like a Hansi yellow in here, right there. And if I take maybe a little quinacridone magenta, turn it more into a orangish blush, and put that in. Now it's very light. I'm going to go ahead and increase the color a little bit. So instead of going yellow, I have more of that red color in there. I'm going to move it around. Now, if we just go back and forth like that, you're going to have a strip. And if I want it to move and transition in a different direction, I'm just going to move the paper. I'm going to go ahead and try to increase this a little bit. So I don't mind it actually that it's moving into that blue a little bit. And then I'll bring, I know the color is very weak right now. And then I'm going to bring the little blue down here. And if you notice, I'm leaving more of a white space in between here. That's going to be where that water is. Now you can see in this area that there's a really dry edge. So to soften that, I'll take my number 30, remove the extra water, and then soften the edge of color. Okay, and then, so that would basically be my foundation here. Now what I could do is try to build the color up a little bit more, and I'm debating whether or not I want to do that. Why not? So what I'm doing right now is taking a look at the surface to see what the shine is on there and if it's possible. Because if it's really dry, it's not going to move. So let's go back to this for 1 second. Just going to boost that color a little bit. Now this basic technique is in that atmospheric landscape course. Okay, so now if that happens, I know a lot of you would be freaking out. So we're not going to worry about it. And if you want to, all I need to do is change the direction of the paper, or I could take another damp brush, remove the excess water. In fact, let's go ahead and bring some of that orange color into this, and then just let it sit. Now this is a good foundation for, let's go so you can see, for that painting right there. But I have to let it dry. I can't do anything else right now because it's just going to bleed. So I could sit there and put a hairdryer to it while you're waiting there. Or what I'm going to do is just put that to the side. Now let's do the same thing with this painting. Let's make sure that this is the one you're seeing. Yep. All right, so with this here, let me get rid of this. I'm thinking I could go the wet on the wet. I could do that in the background. In fact, I probably will. And I'm looking at this. So I'm looking at the lightest colors first. All right, so now if I did this on dry paper, we're going to have streaking color. So that's why I want to get the water on here. So I'm just repeating what we just did. I'm going to take another look at that, and if we have a chance, I'll go back to it. I'll just do it pretty quickly. I've already explained everything. Now that's a lot of color that I'm putting in here. In fact, that's a little too much. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this, trying to get that little bit of yellow in there, and I'm going to do this. It's the same idea. I'm using that amount of water and color, and let's see, I think that this might be in the book. I know it was in the Watercolor Emotion book, and it was also in my Watercolor Essentials book. So here, obviously, it can turn green. I'm trying to stay ahead of it, but I'm not worried about it. Now, I think one of the biggest things is that everybody gets worried and freaked out that they're making a mess or a mistake. Try not to worry about it. Work with what is happening on the paper. Okay. And actually, I'm pretty much speed painting, so let's see, I'm getting a little bit of that orange in here. So I would maybe spend a little more time doing it, but just so you can get an idea. And I may not like those strokes. I may not like how that looks. So how am I going to deal with it? I can take my number 30 natural hairbrush, remove the extra water, soften that stroke of color. And if that's not what I want to do, I can come back in with this brush, remove the extra water. I don't like that edge. I may just come in and just sweep across it. And maybe I'll even lift a little color out. Anyway, this would be my foundation. Actually, I'd like some clouds right here. So I'd like to remove some of that yellow. And I think I'm going to get some French ultramarine blue and a little burnt sienna. I like the Winsor & Newton French ultramarine blue and burnt sienna combination. It had, and even if it was a cobalt blue, I just like the hue of this. Then I'm going to go ahead and maybe make some trees, or not trees, sorry, some fog above the treetops that are going to be there. And what I'm thinking about right now, if I use a lot of water here, it's going to spread a lot. I'd like a little more control, so I might make it a little drier. And then here we have all that little feathering that's happening. And I'm going to skip that along. This would be great for clouds. And you may want to bring a little bit of that down into the water. And to avoid that feathering like that, just change the direction of the paper so it softens that feathering. Actually, I like the angle of it like this. And I think I'm going to go ahead and drop in. As I'm doing this here, I'm thinking that brush is too small for what I'm doing right now because it's going to dry quicker and then I can work. I'm thinking I'd like some fog right up there. I'm going to switch to a number 20. Now that's too brown. The other thing is, how do you make enough color for what you're doing? But that's a whole nother thing. And I'm just moving that around to get my little fog. Maybe I'll drop a little bit more in here. And then just change the direction of my paper. So that would basically be my foundation for that painting that we were just looking at. If I can get back to it, where is it? So that would be the foundation. I'd let it dry and then I'd come back in, put my trees, and then start working on that water. But if we have time, we can come back to that. And let's see, what number 20 and 30 brushes are you using? So this is my own brand, but also Cosmotop makes them. And this is the natural, and that is the 20 blend. Now, if you have a spin brush, which is what most, here's a spin. That is a synthetic brush. It's very nice, but it won't release the amount of water that we need. And also Escoda is very good, and also the Winsor Newton Scepter Gold brushes are wonderful. I'm really liking how this is turning out. So I'm going to put it over to the side and let it start to dry. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and tear my paper so you can see what I'm doing here. Tear it again. And as I'm doing this, I'm thinking about where I want to start and how I want to approach this. This is the waterfall. It's going to look really nice if you have a clean edge to it. So I'm going to do the same thing here, because one of the things that happens, which is very common, is that you don't know where to go. So you need a boundary. Either you have a pencil line boundary, or you paint out to the edge, or you end up using a piece of tape. Now, it'd be nice to have a little bit smaller tape, thinner tape, but that's okay. I'll just do this. And actually, you can even find the basic, I think you can find the basic waterfall one on my YouTube channel. I don't do much with that. And I thought about doing more of demonstrations on the YouTube channel, but with my internet, it's a little slow and lags, so I'm not too sure if that's something I want to do, but I may do that. Oh, okay. And then from a Moto, it's Moto G, it says, do I wait for it to dry on its own or speed up the drying? And with with speeding up the drying with a hairdryer, you can do that. Or some people like to use a heat gun. But if you move it around, it homogenizes the color. So it basically makes it flatter looking. And you can do that, or you can put it out in the sun, or just wait. Or some people like to do multiple paintings at a time. If I personally like to stay with one painting, unless I'm doing something like this. If I'm doing my florals, I'll stay with one painting. Now, what I'm looking for are my synthetic, of course, I don't have that right here. I want to, let me just find something very quickly. I love my number, there we go. When doing a waterfall, I love using my number 20, what do we call this? A wash modeler. There's larger sizes. I have these available in my store on my website, birgito'connor.com, if that interests you. So, and why I like this actually better than a 1-inch flat. Let's see if I have one here, right there. You can use this. This is fine. But why I like this better is if you see that the hair is longer, it has more bounce to it. Let's see if you can see that a little bit better. It's just funner to use. It fits nicely in your hand. But you will find what works the best for you. All right. So what I'm thinking about as I'm doing this is I don't really need to use a pencil, but why not? So we get an idea where we're going. This is very easy to do, a free form thing. Now we're going to have our, let's see, pool up here, and then it's going to come down, and I'm going to have a few rocks over here. So what I'm mentally doing is just preparing myself or getting a better idea where I want to go. And we don't need a lot of detail. That also helps me have an idea where I want my flow of water to go. And I'll do another one back here. And I've got all the green leaves on that side. I don't know if I'll put them in, maybe just a suggestion, we'll see. Okay, so basically we've got our pool up here. We have a few little rocks. Let's get an idea. They'll be there, maybe a few more little rocks through here. No big deal to put those in. Then yes, I didn't know whether or not I wanted to put this on the YouTube channel or to keep it within the course. So I will think about it. And actually your suggestions are always very helpful because we'll see. That was like the last thing on my mind. I was trying to figure out how to make this all work. All right. So what I'm doing is taking some French ultramarine blue. I'm going to move this over to the side so I can see the I need to see what I'm doing here. All right. And if you noticed, this was a little drier. It had more pigment in it, but I do have a puddle of water. And let's see, I'm thinking, this is again, my basic blend. I'll take some permanent sap green. Sorry, I'm thinking about it, but I'm taking the burnt sienna. Get that in there. I'll take some permanent sap green, move it over to the side. I think that that's too weak, so I'm taking more, bringing that over. Now, if you have favorite greens, you can always make those too. And I would usually maybe take a little more time building my water and color blend up, or not water and color blend up, but the color on the paper there. I want to go a little darker. Right now, this is all dry. You can see how dark I'm getting this because I'm thinking about that pool of water up on top. I'm going wet on dry. This also helps me be looser. And if I was using a round brush, I find it more challenging. It just has a lot more freedom. I would have more of a tendency to paint the little shapes with a round brush. Here I can just, you see how far I'm holding it up in my hand and how I'm holding it? What I always notice is that a lot of people hold their some brushes like that. That doesn't make any sense to me. You know, it's like, keep it loose in your hand. All right, I'm gonna bring some of that color down here. And let's see, we have some rocks over there. And I might have some moss on those other rocks. At least you're hearing every thought that I'm having here. All right, I know this is going to be darker water right through there. So I'm painting the darkest water first. And I'm actually thinking I might bring some quinacridone gold into this. I guess it all depends where this stream is. Okay, I'm not going to do too much of that. I know it doesn't look like much, and then I'm thinking about, I could work on the white water, but if I do that right now, if you were doing that, you would have a tendency of putting too much color in there. So I'm going to switch over to the rocks. So I'm taking some more burnt sienna into this. And I'm going to think about, where I have some shadow and the shape. And I'm trying to change the size of them a little bit. They all look like little tiny brush strokes right now. And what I'm debating, do I want to use my round brush or the flat brush to just help pull out some of that color so we have a lighter area on the rock? Just like that. And if I want it to be maybe even more interesting, I might even touch that edge, let some of that watercolor run up into it, because I can always redefine that a little later. And what I'm thinking about over here is the moss on the rocks. I almost went too far. I thought about going up to this area, which I don't need to do. All right, so now what I'm thinking about, do I want to go and start thinking about the trees on the side, or do I want to start thinking about the whitewater? And I am starting to get an idea where I want that flow of it to come down. I'm actually going to touch this edge through here just with water. And I like that light color right up here. And that little blossoming up there, I could leave it, or I can just get it a little more wet again. And as we come down into this pool, I want that to be lighter. So I'm going to change the direction of my brush. I'm holding it more straight up and down. And actually, I think I went a little too dark in here, maybe not. I might lift a little color out. Okay, so I don't want to do too much right now, or I might lose that. So I'll move over to the side. And I'm thinking I could play with shapes of rocks, or what I could do is add some greenery. I think for right now, I'm going to just play with some darker rocks, because I don't want to paint too much of this area here. Let's go ahead and get some of those green leaves in there. So basically, I'm just mingling color right now over on the side. This doesn't have a lot of definition to it. let's see, I think I may have lost a little bit of that white through there. And once it dries, I can actually do more shaping with those leaves. That was a little too much yellow, but that's okay. Maybe get a leaf down here. Maybe I'll throw in some of that moss down here on the rocks that are starting to still dry. Hopefully you can see that. So I would need this to dry a little bit more so I can develop it. And let's see, I think I don't need it to completely dry, just a little bit more. So why don't I just take a little hair dryer to this, because this is when I would maybe consider speeding it up a little bit. I just wanted to turn off the sound so you didn't have to hear that. Now, some of it is fairly dry. Other areas are still really wet. So going back to my little 20 wash modeler, I'm thinking about the colors that I want to use here. This is getting kind of muddy. This could be fine, but what I'm looking for is more contrast. So this is not dark enough. I'm gonna go ahead and remove that. And I'm going to try to get some of that darker value in here. In fact, I might even bring in a little indigo, go back to my French ultramarine blue. Oh, sorry, burnt sienna. That just naturally comes out of my mouth. Indigo and burnt sienna. Here I said that it was going to be 45 minutes, and what do? I go right over it again. Okay, I'm going to bring in some of that. Get some of that darker value through here. Let it mingle. And where is my little dark spot here? Right through here. So this is a more abstracted. And I'm deciding, is that my white water? Yes, that's going to be my white water. And I can do a little negative painting with those leaves if I wanted. What does that mean? Is that I'm going to go ahead and paint the area around that leaf. But I don't want to take too much time or think about it too much. How about if I just do a little bit of that? Well, it can change it into some other kind of vegetation. All right. And so where do I want that darker area? I think what I might do is come in with a 14 to help me define some areas. Go a little darker right through here. Think about that water. There's a nice little shadow right there in that rock. So I'm thinking about the shadows right now. What I just did here was press a little harder on my brush, so I had a different type of stroke. And this area right here, I'm trying to decide, what do I really want to do with that? And I do have some little rocks that I'd like to put in, but now thinking about those little rocks, I don't necessarily want to paint them. Otherwise it can be a little distracting. Otherwise that hard line of that shape that I would draw in could just totally distract the viewer. So what I might do is take maybe a number 8 brush, get some of that color. Notice where I'm holding my hand a little higher up the handle, so I have a little bounce to it. And I'm thinking let's break it up. And maybe a little bit more over here. Just break up that area. I don't think it's showing up well enough, so I'm going to go ahead, use a larger brush, a number 14. Okay, so now this would be basically what I would work with, and we don't want to do too much to this, but let's see. I'm using my number 8 brush, and the danger with this is actually going in and getting too fussy. So I'm going to look for that shadow we have here, and I want to try to define some of that. I might even use the dry brush technique. I've got water on the brush, but I might drag it across the surface to get that little rumble in there. And actually I'm going to remove some of that water so I don't put on too much water there. Let's see if you can see that little, oops, that little teeny bit right there. I think it's a little challenging to see it because it's pretty light. But that's basically what I would do. And then the rest is just fine tuning and maybe adding a little more detail here without overdoing it. See, like this little line right there, I think you could easily start to overdo it. So what I would do is I'm going to just lift that out. And let's go ahead and remove our tape. This should be fine. At least it'll give you the idea. And I think that we could have a little more detail in there. But let's see. Get a little bit on there. I just don't want to overdo it, just do too much to it. So let's see, where do I want to go with anything? How about maybe a little bit up here? Maybe. And then we could always define more of those leaves. I could come back in with a smaller brush and just work with how I hold the pressure on my brush, like either straight up and down or more flat. So hopefully that helped. Did that help you have a better idea of how to approach that? And for Moto, yes, you know, what can happen is that with the speed of the internet, it could be blurry. And yes, this is it's a webcam, so it's not like having my actual lessons where I have a better quality of camera on that. All right, everyone. So I did have a little bit more that I could do, but I see I already went over what I said I would do. Of course, I always enjoy spending my time with all of you. And all right, so I think I'm going to let you go for now because I do have so much more I want to share with you, but I'll just keep going, and that is not necessarily what you all need today. Okay, everyone. So I am going to let you go for now. And like I said, we have our active course, Waves and Water right now, and Fearless Flowers, and what's coming up is Rock, Sand, and Sea Glass. And I really still wanted to continue looking at other pictures with you today, but we've gone over. And I think that I will send out another email, and maybe we can continue. How does that sound? All right, just let me know. Okay, great. This is fantastic. I love seeing all your comments in here. This is wonderful. And let's see. Yes, I think it was Rita. Oh, you definitely hear my thought process when it comes to the live meetings. And I can't help, you know, I have that very calm voice when it comes to the lessons. That's just what happens. But when we have the interactive meetings, you hear everything of how I process. Now that was the one I was thinking about doing today. but I think that it would take more time. So because I would show you how to do that fog in the background, the houses and this, and that's not just a quick little painting. It's pretty quick, but not as quick as I was thinking. I think it's better to go ahead and continue with the ones that we were already working on. And I'll just stick around for a few more minutes and do that. And let's see, we had a question. And Bonnie has plenty of time. Okay, that's and then we've got Francoise, and I'll think about that. So let's go ahead and continue here. And the interactive courses, oh, okay. Yes, I'll tell you honestly, like you can go to other places and get some really cheap courses for $19 or whatever, but what you get here is you have me answering your questions. You've got the interactive meetings that you can join. So there is a lot of content here. It really depends what your goals are. So let's go ahead and take another look at these. So we can take a look. We have our background. It's still a little light. I mean, light, but wet. But you'll get the idea. So I'm going to continue with that. So ideally, this should be dry, but you will get the idea. Okay, so here, I'm going to go ahead. Let's get rid of these greens. I don't need to completely get rid of them. I just need that yellow gone. And I'm going to use a number 14 blend brush, get some water into the palette, and I'll use a little bit of that light, a light value. So I'm using a little cobalt blue. I think I might put a little quinacridone magenta into it. And I'm going to put in my hills in the background. Now I don't necessarily want to use a pencil, but I'm going to, so you can have an idea of what I am doing, where I'm going. This would be a ridge line through here. Then we have another ridge line through here. And then our body of water is going to be about right there, I think. And then another ridge coming down through here. This will be our water. All right, so hopefully you can see that. Now, let's go back to that picture. I'm just going to stick around for just a moment so you can get an idea of this. Okay, so we've got our background in. Let's see if you can see this. We've got our background in, and I put those ridges. All right, I'm starting with a light value in the palette. And I could come in and I could paint it this way. Use the tip of my brush, I could do that. Or if I wanted to be more irregular, I could actually turn it upside down and drag the belly of the brush right there over the surface so it has more of a natural movement to it. And then you can always clean it up when you turn it right back, right side up again if you want. Now, a lot of times people would stop right here, and it really depends what you're going to do. A lot of people stop there and then put the next layer in, and then you've got those overlapping edges, which you don't necessarily want. So using a damp brush, I'm going to go ahead and just continue to bring that color down a little bit. I'm just softening that edge, just like that. As long as it goes down in it just like we want that pigment to disappear, that line to disappear there. Okay, just to give you an idea. So now we have, that could even be fog or ocean, sea breeze coming up, or the mist, whatever we want it to be. Now I'm going to dry that very quickly. Now that's not completely dry, but I'm going to increase the values. That means I'm going to bring more pigment into my puddle. I want less water, more color, but I don't want to go too dark. You can see how much water I have in here. Then I'm going to do the same thing. Let's take a look at the picture so I can get a better idea of what I'm doing. Now this is also in the basic, this idea is in the atmospheric landscapes course. Okay, I'm going to add a little more water there because I didn't want it to be so thick. Let's bring that all the way over here. Now, this is going to be fine if this is where the water is going to be, but I don't necessarily want that really hard line. What I could do if I want it lighter, I might wait for that to dry and then lift a little color out. But there's another little land mass here, and we don't want those overlapping edges. So what I'll do, let's get rid of that possibility. So we'll just dissolve that edge and bring that down. So you can see that. And this is 140 paper, so you can see it's buckling right there. And if I didn't want that, I could either hit it with a hairdryer or just allow that excess water to run off. And one reason why I don't attach it to a board is because I want to be able to move it.
Now we don't necessarily need this to be bone dry, but we need the paper dry enough that when we apply a brush stroke on top of it, that we have a nice crisp edge. Otherwise, it's going to feather out and it's going to look like we don't have any control. Now I'll be using the same color blend of French ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, and I want it to be a darker value. So you can gradually see we have the lighter value in the distance, and as we get closer to the foreground, it's starting to get darker. I also want to try to have more of a random looking edge, so it's not perfectly straight. Then as we get down closer into the foreground, I'm going to increase the value, and if I wanted, I could actually try to put some grass in, and that would create an entirely different effect. That means the viewer would have a starting point before they enter the painting, but what I'm thinking is that I would like to have the viewer just feel like they can go off into the distance. Now you also might be wondering why I don't have the actual photograph of what we're painting available right here. That's because I didn't plan on painting this one, and I had it more in that file where we were just looking at the images. The other thing about not having a photograph available to you all the time is that way you're focusing on what you have in the painting instead of trying to replicate a photograph. So instead of having all those little blades of grass, I want the viewer to move through the different values of color. So I think that this really conveys what I had in mind to show you. You have the different values, you can get that atmospheric effect. So to get a better idea of how this looks, let's remove the tape and then see the final painting. Now you can always add more details, but this really conveys the idea.
Is that you could see that I increased the value, slowly increased the value as I went into each ridge line into there. And then we had our nice highlight from here from the sky, from our initial layer. And I think you should give this a try. It's a very beautiful little painting. So I apologize for not having the sound, and I'm going to let you go for today. And we have our rock, sand, and sea glass tomorrow, along with waves, water, waves. I think that one, the waves and water course is happening, and the fearless flowers. Okay, everyone, I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much for joining me. And for those of you that have been in my interactive course, I miss not being able to see you, but I do see your names. All right, everyone. Take care and happy painting. What I think I'm going to do is I will try to do another one of these very soon. So I will send an email out when I'm able to. All right, everyone. Take care. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a great weekend. Bye, everyone.